Major Insight is a production of Miami University. This is where we showcase successful students, their promising new research, and its relevance in our world. Megan Cremeans is interested in causing social and political change by exploring the ways in which democracy and education are inseparably intertwined. As a double major in integrated social studies education and political science, she uses the applied side of policy to find practical ways to fight inequality and injustice, especially in schools, where she researches public school funding disparities in Ohio. And on this episode, Megan also talks with Major Insight host Peter Everett about representing and empowering students across campus, her rewarding experiences as a student teacher, and how college has helped her become a better leader.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for joining us on Major Insight today.
Awesome. Thank you.
So just for the audience, just tell us what your major is and your academic interests and maybe some of the orgs you're involved in.
Yeah, my name is Megan Cremeans. I am a senior majoring in political science and AYA social studies education with a minor in history, and I am involved in all kinds of things around campus. First and foremost, I am a student on the Miami University Board of Trustees, which is the governing body for the university. But I'm also involved in clubs like the Government Relations Network, Janus, the Council for the Social Studies, and the Armstrong Student Center Board.
Wow, that's quite a bit on your plate there.
I try to stay busy. Yeah, I come with a political science and education background, so I'm interested in how policy works, but I'm also very interested in education and the more practical applied side of policy.
Also, I noticed you won the Goldman Prize.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And could you talk about maybe how that experience was and maybe what that research was that you got the Goldman Prize
Yeah,
for?
that was really a rewarding experience. I received the Goldman Prize this year, which is Miami University's largest prize for an undergraduate student to conduct research or any sort of project. And mine is titled loosely Combating Injustice in School Funding. And where that comes from is growing up, I was educated and raised in an Appalachian school in part of rural and Appalachian Ohio. And my opportunities were a bit different from my peers when I got to Miami. And so I got really interested in educational equity and whether opportunities for everyone are really equal or if that's just a goal or if we should try and reach that goal. And so my project, funded through the Goldman, kind of looks at that.
Okay. So maybe I know that some people might think, okay, that's like a utopian vision and it's just something to strive for, but maybe not something we're ever going to really achieve. That's not realistic. Would you agree with that? Or would you say that, okay, maybe go into your project in a little more detail, like, okay, is there a way to actually achieve that like more utopian vision?
Right. Well, my thought is I have to bring it back. I'm a political science major. I have to bring it back to the law. And there's a Ohio Supreme Court case called DeVaul versus the state of Ohio, which ruled that Ohio's school funding system is unconstitutional. And so they called on the lawmakers to make a change to have thorough and equitable systems according to the Ohio Constitution. And I think that if you push hard enough and enough people are able to tell their stories, our lawmakers will do us right and make those changes.
That's good. And that's at a local government level, correct?
Yes, that's the state government.
Okay. So there is definitely more advocacy where, okay, those legislators that are closer to you and closer to your community, right, are the ones that are really going to be able to make that change because maybe the federal government can't.
Yeah. Well, schools are up to the state, to fund. And so I think that state and local governments are where change is made, and especially in education. So I'm really happy to be working with different state legislators and have the voice of or have the ear of certain legislators.
Yeah, that's just refreshing for me, just because I'm a history major as well, and do a lot of stuff with political science organizations, and a lot of times students are really, they're advocating for federal policies and the federal government to step in. But I think sometimes the state governments get ignored, so it's really refreshing to hear, okay, there's some research and there's some people focused on reaching out to the state governments and working with the state governments. So.
I am a huge fan of state and local government. I will get on that soapbox every day.
Oh, that's awesome. So I guess maybe that work within the school funding. So that school funding work, is that something you're trying to apply directly as you maybe work in Talawanda, or is that maybe something you can bring even into your board of trustees position? Like maybe how does that kind of that research and that passion and that background maybe feed into those projects?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing about school funding is that it impacts everybody. Everyone who goes to a public school or is around a public school is impacted by how their public school is funded. So in my case, I'm student teaching right now at Talawanda, which is the local high school, and I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
And they're really pretty well funded, which is exciting. And those students have a lot of opportunities within their school. But at the same time, with my background, I'm able to recognize inequities in funding as well as inequities in personal lives and, experiences outside of the classroom.
Sure.
And so I hope as a student teacher, later a teacher, or later whatever I want to do, as well as on the board of trustees, I'm able to kind of speak to these inequities and injustices that people face and fight for people to have more equitable opportunities.
Sure. So I guess how does that work more on like a practical level, for example, when a teacher learns that, maybe a student has problems at home, like the parents or, one of the parents went to prison or there's abuse or there's some other types of those kind of inequities that maybe the school can't directly control.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe how does that research that you're doing like really maybe speak to that or maybe try to rectify that in some ways? Is that what you're talking about with inequities outside of
inequities?
Outside the classrooms?
I'm largely speaking financially.
Financially, okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
The numbers kind of inequities, but you're right. There's all kinds of things. Students are human beings too. I think we forget that a lot. We see them as a test score, and being an education major, I've been able to see the humanity that is in our schools outside of the policy. So my research is focused on the state's funding, right? But truly, I'm gathering stories from people about their own experiences. So I will talk to a mom who will say, I have to send my kids to the public school because they give my kids free breakfast and lunch, and I can't afford to do any other meals. Or, I'm working with a parent who will say something like, I had to have my daughter in the public school system because otherwise she has special needs that would never be met. And so those types of things, of course we have, and schools provide a lot of wraparound services outside of education that benefit our country and our kids.
And all that just really underscores the need for that equitable funding that you're advocating for.
Yes,
really,
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Cool, that's awesome. So I guess as you're achieving all this, as you're working on the Board of Trustees, as you're involved with all these student organizations, how has Miami and your experience here really equipped you to succeed in those realms and really push yourself to that next level?
Yeah, I keep getting this question. I'm towards the end. I'm a senior, and people keep asking like, "Oh, what are you going to do next?" And I have tons of options, which is really exciting. But I've been thrilled to tell people I'm really confident in my Miami education. You could put me anywhere, and I think I could do it based on my experiences and my academic preparation. I have the skills to succeed in the workforce, no matter what that is.
I'd say the same. Be honest, it's been a really fun ride so far. I'm not as quite far along as you are, but
yeah.
It's exciting stuff, and I guess. Especially, I think my professors personally have really had a big impact. I think is really what it comes down to for me. But if you had to give advice to any incoming Miami students who are thinking about coming to Miami and thinking about really maybe trying to realize their passions here, what kind of advice would you give them?
Oh my gosh, so much advice. First of all, say yes, come to Miami. Second of all, say yes and just keep saying yes. The best thing that I did when I started college was I just said yes to everything. And some of the stuff didn't work out, and I eventually didn't do it, or I said, I'm going to pursue something else. But I said yes to all kinds of stuff I wouldn't have normally gotten myself into. And without that, I wouldn't have become so diverse in my interests. I'm more empathetic. I'm definitely a better leader, and I'm so grateful for just the capacity and the ability to say yes.
And I guess maybe could you give a picture, maybe your kind of mindset coming into college versus what your mindset looks like now?
Yeah, big changes. I had a lot of room for growth coming in, which I didn't realize because when you're a senior in high school, you're like, I'm king of the world. Who cares? And that's normal. That's fine. But I came in and I was actually kind of bitter about coming to Miami.
Really?
Miami's was my last choice on my list. I didn't want to be here, but it was my most financially affordable option. And I can't even afford to come here, and still here I am because that's the most affordable option. And now I am one of the many kids that say Miami wasn't my first choice, but I really wish it was. I really wish that I would have been 100% behind being here and would have thrown myself into it first, because it took me a little while. It took me about 3 semesters before I was like, wait, this is my home, and to take advantage of all the opportunities here. You talked about your professors. Professors and people who work here, staff and faculty, have made all the difference in my life.
Absolutely.
They have completely given me every opportunity. They have sat down with me and talked to me about my aspirations and my goals and tried to help me come up with ways to get there. And there's no straight path. And they have been so influential. And then like you know, I've gotten involved, made tons of friends, and gotten to do cool things like podcasts and made up stuff to do.
We are pretty cool, I guess.
It is cool. And it's been great. And reflecting back, I'm so grateful for the growth and for someone and so many people being patient with me and being willing to put their faith in me as a person to kind of get it in gear and get stuff done.
Wow. How's student teaching for you?
It's so much fun. I teach psychology all day long, and it is a blast. I like teaching psychology because it's like immediately relevant to kids' lives. When you are 16 years old, the most important person in your life is you. And so they love learning about themselves and learning about the reasons why they are the way that they are according to psychology, or the reasons why their friends say that, or their parents say that, or how their parents' decisions impact them. And they share their stories, and our conversations are great. My biggest thing is I'm interested in making change, period. And probably through education policy. But I don't think that you have to be a politician to make good change. I think that you have to be someone who's invested in your community and who's willing to put in the work. And I don't know that you have to run to office to do that. I'm not saying I won't run for office, but I'm just saying I want to make change however I can.
So if you had to pick something about Miami, like a Miami experience, or maybe just a program Miami has that really maybe catapulted you to where you are today, what would it be?
I think it comes down to time in the classroom. I think when people think about college, they start worrying about like dining halls and clubs and all of this stuff that's also incredibly important. But learning things in the classroom and then applying it outside of the classroom has been extraordinarily influential. So without my experiences in the classroom, I couldn't do what I do outside of the classroom.
Sure. I think a lot of maybe I've talked to some of my professors about this. I think some kids come into college with the mentality, oh, this is a transaction. I'm paying money in exchange for a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the mentality you really want is I come to college for the privilege to learn.
Right.
And like a passion for learning. I think that maybe that's another way of putting what you just said.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's something that's really struck home for me, and I've had to develop that within myself because I definitely had I had the wrong perspective. I was definitely thinking, oh, I'm just here to get my degree, and then make some money, get a job. But it's really like the joy, I guess, learning for the sake of learning itself.
There's a joy in learning. You have to find it and find what you're passionate about. And I'm so glad I did. Yeah. And you too. It's great.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much for coming in, Megan. It's been a great interview.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.